Welcome, everybody. So thrilled that you're here for our second session. What is AI and why resist it in relation to the environment? If you missed the first session, we do have a recording from that. There was over 400 people registered. A lot of them will be watching the recording afterwards, even if they can't make the sessions. So, welcome everybody. My name is Mary Linda Moss. I'm an artist and activist in Los Angeles, one of the founding members of NELA, Alliance for Democracy. We are a grassroots collective in Los Angeles committed to nonviolent action to promote democracy. Our focus is on fighting fascism, defending human rights, and protecting vulnerable communities. We are both a local group and have done a lot of work with coalition building across Southern California and across the West Coast. Coalition work is, I think, the most critical thing we can be doing. Joining forces, supporting one another, inspiring one another. We have our group representatives trying to support one another and inform, but we do have individuals come as well. If you've been coming to NELA Alliance for Democracy programs for a while, we've been doing them for over a year and a half now. We are really grateful for the wealth of knowledge that comes our way that we're able to share. We do feel it is absolutely critical to be informed in order to be impactful in how we can fight some of the changes that are happening in our world, in our country. Being informed is the first best step to knowing what to do. So welcome to What is AI and Why Resist It, our second session. Last week's session discussed AI and labor. We had an Amazon worker and a labor organizer, as well as a nurse who is also a labor organizer, and then we had a filmmaker. It was a really interesting, informative session, alarming, as a lot of this is, but very informative and grounded in personal experience and how it is affecting people personally and where things are going. It was highly informative and powerful. The video is available on YouTube. This week, our focus is on AI and the environment. We will also have two more sessions on AI and education on August 12th and AI and surveillance incarceration on August 26th. We have great speakers for each of these talks. So I encourage you to come back after tonight. So for tonight, we're going to start with Dr. Pablo Ortiz Partida, a scientist with the Union of Concerned Scientists, who will cover our local environmental impacts of data centers, which are the infrastructure that AI needs to work. Then we will have Zeb Larson, a historian, writer, and a regular contributor to TruthDig, will discuss how people are effectively organizing to stop data centers from being built in their communities. That is going to be a recording tonight. He's not able to be here this evening, but he recorded for us a wonderful presentation. And then rounding out tonight's program, NELA's own member and environmental energy journalist and communicator, William Kelly, will cover the global impacts of AI, focusing on the impacts of mining the metals needed to make data centers work and on the attendant greenhouse gas emissions. Each speaker will speak maybe 10 to 15 minutes, then we'll have half hour for questions and discussion. So we're going to start with, to help frame the coming discussion, we're going to start with a brief clip.
A highly unusual move from the Trump Justice Department. They're siding with Elon Musk in his legal battle over his AI data center in Memphis. Congressman Frank Pallone, who is the top Democrat on the House Energy Committee, posted on X, Trump's DOJ is stepping in to help a Musk-owned data center run dozens of gas-burning turbines without a permit or pollution controls. Now, this is a data center of all data centers. Musk's data center is the world's largest AI supercomputer, okay? And it's in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, the NAACP sued Musk's company, xAI, amid overwhelming outcry from local residents. Writing, a data center should not be a potential death sentence. These companies are following a shameful, familiar pattern, asking Black and frontline communities to bear the toxic brunt of and they have a quote, innovation. But the DOJ says the lawsuit should be thrown out because the data center is vital to national security. Out front now, Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson. He lives just a few miles from xAI's data center in Memphis. He's now running for Congress as a Democrat. And Representative, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's unconscionable and unbelievable that the Department of Justice is using its influence and power to the benefit of the world's first trillionaire in order to allow them to continue to operate illegal gas turbines. Not only have they done this in Memphis, but also in South Haven, Mississippi, where this lawsuit is, where they have 59 gas turbines in complete violation of the Clean Air Act. And they're asking the court to allow them to illegally pollute the air that we breathe, kill people prematurely, disadvantaged communities in particular, also they can make more money. And the Department of Justice is helping them to do this. It's unbelievable. This is about them making more profits and putting all of the risk on the communities where they are operating these data centers, which is why I've been an extreme supporter of Bernie Sanders' legislation for a moratorium, because they are going to go at all costs to destroy our very lives, our land, our water for their own benefit. They're using nearly $1 billion of drinking water to cool these plants.
Just wanted to give some context because it's not just about the impact, but why are these things being pushed forward? So I would like to now introduce Dr. Pablo Ortiz Partida. He is the Director of Innovation and Collaboration for the Union of Concerned Scientists. So Pablo has a PhD in water resources management and a degree in environmental engineering. His areas of expertise include climate change, environmental justice, science, communication and education, partnership building, and community-based research and outreach. Thank you so much, Pablo Ortiz Partida, for joining us and sharing all your knowledge with us on this topic.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for sharing this time with me and talking about data centers. I'm originally from Mexico, from Jalisco, the land of tequila, mariachi, quesadillas. And for those not familiar with the Union of Concerned Scientists, we do research to inform public policy, to build a healthier planet and a safer world. And we help people and elected officials to find better ways to respond to the consequences of climate change, to cut oil, to ramp up renewable energies, reduce the threats of nuclear weapons, and build a healthier food system. So today I'm here to talk about data centers and artificial intelligence, of course. So almost everything that we do online lives or gets processed in a data centers. Every web page, email, text, video, even this Zoom call is somehow going through a data center. However, there are different types of data centers. Some have existed for a couple of decades, maybe even a little bit more, but not all of them, but most of the new data centers are used to process artificial intelligence prompts, like from ChatGPT, from Gemini, Grok, and other AI models that you may have used or heard about. While it's often called the cloud, data centers are physical buildings filled with computers. And the data centers that I'll be talking about today have tens to thousands of computers and IT equipments. Data centers may come in different size and shapes, from small server rooms to warehouse-sized facilities operated by some of the tech giants like Google, Microsoft, Meta, Apple, Amazon. And there are also what are called co-location facilities or co-location data centers, which are buildings that are owned by a third party. And many other companies rent a space in these buildings. Sometimes they rent the computers, or sometimes they bring their own servers and computers to these facilities. So these data centers consume electricity, use water, emit emissions, make noise, and most importantly, also have neighbors. And the facilities in these pictures represent the landscape in which we have lived kind of up to 2020, 2022. And there is a new generation of data centers that is called hyperscale data centers. And these are mostly specifically to handle AI workloads. So this is Shirley Road area outside Abilene, Texas. On the left is how it looked in 2024. And this is where the OpenAI Stargate data center is being built. And the developers may say things like, oh, there was nothing there. But there were ecosystems, there were rangelands, there were history there. And on the right, now it's the same place 2 years after, with multiple building structures, extensive grading, power substations coming online. And it's not only a bigger version of the previous generation of data centers, but it's kind of like a fundamentally different category of infrastructure that is being built at speed and scale that most communities and regulators are not prepared for. And this is happening in real time across the country. So for comparison between the previous generation of data centers and the current one, I think this really lands the scale difference. So on the left, we have that core site location campus in Santa Clara. It's 6 buildings, about 26 acres. The biggest building draws up to 18 megawatts of power. The facility, this facility has been serving dozens of companies for years and is considered a large data center by any traditional measures. But then on the right, we have this Stargate campus, which is 8 buildings, about 620 acres, roughly 1,200 megawatts once it's going to be completed. And in a way, this is not only that bigger data center, it's this different category of infrastructure. Of course, Stargate is not alone. Here are another couple of examples. For example, the Meta Hyperion data center in Louisiana, 2024 in the left and 2025 in the right. Then Amazon with Amazon Web Services in Indiana on the left, 2024, and then on the right, 2025. So you can see the speed that but they are able and capable to lift these buildings. And then some of you may have heard about that if constructed, maybe the biggest data center in the world in Utah. Some estimates are in 40,000 acres. And in this case, it may, if constructed again, be run entirely off-grid using natural gas. So we start seeing a lot of the implications for the environment. I know this is a very busy slide, so let me walk you through what you are seeing here. Each circle is a data center, and the size of the circle reflects the size of the facility. The yellow circles are already operating data centers. The orange ones are under construction, and the white ones are still on the planning stage. And then the lines tell the other half of the story. So the color lines are transmission lines carrying electricity. And then the white lines are the fiber optic cables that are moving the data. So data centers are popping up in nearly every part of the country, but they cluster in the mid-Atlantic states, in Texas, in the upper Midwest, in the Southeast, in California, in Arizona, and in the Pacific Northwest. And notice how many of the plants are landing in rural areas. So there is research from Pew that while 87% of operating data centers are in urban areas, 67% of the new data centers are planned in rural areas. And in the next few slides, I will talk about implications related to water, to air, to noise, and to heat. And a lot of people is already familiar with this, but sometimes I get the question like, why a data center use water in the first place? So let me take that out of the way, and then I show some of the numbers. So how and why data centers use water? The short answer is water is used for cooling. These machines in the data centers generate heat similar to our phones or our computers as we use them. It generates heat, but when we are considering hundreds or even thousands of computers, then that heat gets accumulated, and we need to do something about it, because if not, it may damage the equipment or make the equipment inefficient. So there are different types of cooling. The two big general categories are liquid cooling and air cooling. Now, here is where things have trade-offs, no? So if liquid cooling may use less electricity, but will use more water through what is called evaporative cooling. And then the air cooling may use less water, but it will use more electricity. So I think that's very important, because some data center developers are like, oh, our data centers use very little water. And it's like, well, it may use very little water on site, but that water may be used in the electricity generation. So it's just switching where you use the water. Now, first, water, and I'm going to show the raw numbers here. I'm going to be mentioning acre feet as a measure of volume. You can think of an acre feet as roughly the area of a football field flooded by 1 foot. And California data centers consumed about 40,000 acre feet of water in 2023. This is up from about 20,000 acre feet in 2019. So almost basically double the water that they used from 2019 to 2023. And it's projected to reach about 60,000 to 95,000 acre feet by 2028, depending on how fast data centers are built. This is an important figure, because about 94% of the water is actually used off-site, so for the electricity generation, evaporated at the power plants, making the electricity, and not necessarily at the cooling towers of the data centers. I often get the question if that is, missing one. I often get the question is if that's a lot of water or not. No, and the answer is like, it depends. It depends to what you compare it to. So for example, California uses about 30 million acres of water a year, just in general. That's all the water that California uses for different purposes. For agriculture, California uses 30 million acre feet of water for agriculture. So that would be roughly 740 times what data centers use, right? So, but this is maybe a wrong comparison, because water is better managed locally. So what really matters when talking about water and data centers is what are the local conditions, how is the local water system being developed, and if it can, if it has the economic capacity and the necessary infrastructure to expand, and also who would pay for that expansion. So really looking at the local level is really more important. Air and health. The emissions story of data centers come mainly from two different sources. The first one is the backup diesel generators. Almost every data center has this type of backup generators, and they kick off during grid outages and also while they do testing and maintenance. In some of the hyperscale data centers, they can have in the order of hundreds of diesel generators. And the second source of emission, of course, is from the power plants that feed the data centers. That this can be the gas plants, power plants, for example. And what both of these have in common is that they tend to land hardest on communities that usually have no say in the decision and no real economic stakes in the outcome. And in a way, the pollution is local, but the profits are not local. And that cost, it's really, and can be measured. So this has been measured by researchers. In California alone, data centers' health costs grew from $45 million per year in 2019 to about $155 million in 2023. And these projections are growing. Data centers have also been in the news because of the noise that they produce. Some residents that live near current data centers say that it's like a constant humming 24-hour, 7 days of the week, just constantly from the fans and from the equipment in the roof that are used to cool these data centers. Roughly measure at between 40 to 55 decibels near houses, and it can have different health implications from migraines, disruption of the sleep, inability to concentrate in tasks, and also avoid spending time outside, right? And then chronic and long-term exposure may be more related to mental health effects, hypertension, and affected cognitive performance. I need to clarify that not every data center makes the same amount of noise. Of course, it's going to depend on the type of equipment that they have for cooling and many other factors, and the type of use general infrastructure that they have. Another important topic to mention in terms of environmental implications is that an increase in local heat is another concern. Some of the heat from the buildings and cooling equipment gets dissipated into the surrounding microclimate, and recent estimates, they have an estimate of average increase of about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit around AI data centers once they begin operations. So that added heat lands hardest, of course, on communities that are already hot and have little green space to cool down. And lastly, this is the frame that I keep coming back. Last year, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he suggested that the benefits of artificial intelligence outweighed its cost. No, and these statements often overlook who bears the health and environmental implications, and who gets to decide what trade-offs are acceptable. So the communities breathing the polluted air near data centers, or those experiencing the increase in the electricity cost, are the ones at the front lines of the technology impacts, and often last to the benefits of this technology. Lastly, I want to mention not all AI is the same. Of course, there are in some cases valuable uses of artificial intelligence related to climate modeling, medical diagnosis, materials research. But this type of AI runs off what is more like the traditional machine learning models that are relatively efficient and more bounded. So there is a big difference between the artificial intelligence that has been used for benefiting many different scientific fields than the large language models and the chatbots and the generative artificial intelligence that they claim that they have a lot of positive and benefits, but so far it hasn't been there. I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your time, and I will pass it back to you, Marilyn or Bill.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Pablo Ortiz Partida. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of information to pack in a short time, and that was really beautifully done. Thank you so much. We're now going to getting a chance to listen to Zeb Larson, historian and writer. He will further introduce himself on the video.
Hi there. My name is Zeb Larson. I live in Ohio, so I'm 3 hours ahead, and I have a toddler, and I usually wake up at about 4 a.m. So by 9 p.m. my time, I am functionally useless, unfortunately. So that's why you're getting the broadcast version of me. I am a writer and historian. I have a PhD in history, which I received from the Ohio State University in 2019. I happen to work as a software engineer by day because sometimes it's hard to get a job as an academic historian, and I changed careers, but I've had this other career, sometimes in tech, sometimes in writing, which is partly what led me to the issue of generative AI. Software engineers tend to get asked their opinion on this a lot. My position on generative AI first came actually from what I would say my humanities background is, which is I'm opposed to it. I think it takes human beings out of creative processes. So just instinctively, I dislike it. But then from there, I went to the sort of physical infrastructure that powers generative AI, which led me to the data center issue. And from there, a sense of deep alarm over the damage that these are inflicting. Where I live, Central Ohio, is one of the hotbeds of data center construction nationally. Texas leads the country in terms of overall numbers, followed by Virginia, California, Georgia. Ohio's fifth in the country. Central Ohio has 125. Another uh, 70, I think, are being planned statewide right now. A good example of one of the ones that's sort of under discussion is an AWS center in a near to a neighborhood I live in, Columbus, called Hilliard. It's The AWS center is going to be powered entirely by gas turbines. The estimate is that it's going to put out about 1.5 million pounds of carbon dioxide every single day, which is equivalent to 66,000 cars on the road. It is a less than a mile away from an elementary school. It's situated close to a park. Um, so what have I written on this subject? One piece is a history piece because my background is as a historian, and it was comparing data centers to railroads in the 19th century, which might sound like a favorable comparison. We tend to remember the building of the railroads favorably, but in reality, it was a deeply dysfunctional industry and one that happened with a great deal of graft, environmental damage, and economic damage, frankly. That piece was for Dame magazine. My argument is that, like railroads, the data center industry and generative AI is part of a financial bubble that's going to remake our economy and our environment for the worse, and the damage will get worse the longer we go on. And then I wrote a second piece for Truth Dig, which is another sort of progressive publication, arguing that resisting data centers is at this point, I would say, almost a sort of anti-authoritarian activism. What are some of the reasons for that? Resistance to them, I would contend, is very important. Upfront, you have the environmental costs that these are inflicting. A lot of attention's been paid to water usage. A great deal has been paid to their overall electricity usage. Here's one that people don't tend to contend with is that in many places, even if the data centers don't go through, if they're being accompanied by fossil fuel buildouts in the form of natural gas plants, we're going to be stuck with those. The data center might go away, but if you're left with a fully functioning gas plant, the temptation to use it for something else, it's right there. It's already been built. We've already put the capital into it, and it can be repurposed in a way that an empty data center simply can't be. So that's why stopping this as much as we can is so important. There are the economic costs. One of the issues that you pay attention to nationally at the moment is the fact that Americans' energy bills are going up fairly rapidly after the 2010s was a period of relative stability. In addition to impacting generation, data centers also take a great deal out of the grid because you have to route electricity to them in one way or another. Doing so is going to require upgrades, which in many places is going to ultimately reflect on a cost back to consumers as we have to upgrade our existing grid in order to handle this increased demand. I think latent within all of this, there's a crisis of government. People simply feel that they have been forced to accept these new developments and they are very angry about it. And in many cases, you have data centers that have been approved initially with minimal consultation with citizenry living there. And then finally, there's a sort of anti-authoritarian dimension. Generative AI is one of those tools that's very easy to be hacked by an authoritarian government, either for surveillance or for propaganda. Anything we can do to put pressure on this industry negatively is it going to be a net positive, not just for the United States, but I would contend for global governance. So what's the good news? Because that's a lot of bad news that I just situated up front there. The good news is resistance is actually working pretty well. Um, Opposition to data centers has grown substantially, even in the last 2 years. Data Center Watch, which is a phenomenal resource, estimates that in quarter 1 of 2026, an estimated $130 billion of developments were either blocked or delayed, which would be more than the first 3 quarters of 2025, which was itself a period of ramping up. The state of Maine came within a single vote of declaring a statewide moratorium on data center constructions. Bills exist in 14 other states, in addition to a host of them at the county and municipal level. So there's a great deal of anger about data centers, what they're doing, and what we can do to try and potentially stop them. So, how do we do that? What does effective resistance look like? Well, some of it is simply publicity. That is growing in no small part because of social media, thankfully. Social media has made it easy to disseminate information. Print media is starting to pick this up as well. But then, what are the actual tactics once you've built awareness over the costs that data centers inflict? One way to do it is through zoning and permitting. This is a relatively easy way to get at the problem. Data centers, like any kind of development, have to pass through zoning processes, and those usually offer some level of public hearing and opportunity for comment. Now, uh, these don't tend to be very interesting up front, which is why initial developments might have been able to sneak through. But as the public pays more attention to it, you can start to rally people to offer comment. And once you have people in a position to actually start talking about data centers, what do you do from there? You can talk about something called conditional use permitting. This is a really essential tactic because normal zoning regulations allow you, if something is zoned industrial, you're allowed to put something there. What you do with it, that isn't going to be heavily restricted. Conditional use permitting allows you to put specific restrictions on what might be done there. I was talking to an electrical engineer the other day who pointed out that you could mandate more expensive cooling systems in data centers, which cooling is a huge part of the infrastructure, uh, to the point that I think he estimated it would drive up the cost of construction 30 to 40%. So exploring novel ways to just make it as expensive as possible in order to build, or creating siting rules. You know, you can't build within a mile and a half of an elementary school. Depending on how you sort of jigger that, it might actually be possible to make it impossible for a data center to be built because they require a fair amount of space. Another tactic is going after financial incentives. Lots of cities and states have offered up tax abatements. You know, Ohio's offered up sales tax exemptions to major companies that have come here and built data centers. Those jobs are almost a rounding error compared to the population of the state. They're not very popular right now. They cost the state a lot of money, and data centers are wildly unpopular. Going after the financial incentives is another useful tactic. Again, not something that might stop a data center altogether, but you're increasing their cost of doing business. Another venue to go after, public utilities commissions. Most states have one, and it's there to oversee what utilities do. They're important because they're frequently, as in Ohio, overseeing the electric grid. So if a data center is going to come in, it PUCO in my state, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, can mandate the data centers pay a higher rate than everybody else. The idea being that then they will offset cost to the grid. Effective opposition, you would want to be packing Public Utility Commission hearings to try and drive those rate tariffs as high as possible. There's another important strategy. What remains of federal law? We're with an administration at the moment that is really committed to not enforcing federal law, but it's not dead yet. So, for example, in the state of Alabama, there's a hyperscale data center going in. One of the delaying tactics that local activists have used is that where it's currently sited would affect the Bessemer darter, which is a small fish species that lives in that watershed. So they're forcing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services to review the application before any construction can begin. That's a delaying tactic, but delay is really valuable. Again, it drives up the cost of business, especially as we build towards what the grand strategy is here, which is moratoria. Again, as I mentioned, Maine came within a single vote of passing a statewide moratorium. The Ohio governor for a Democratic candidate is currently considering a conditional moratorium, which I think is weak, but she has come a long way. You've got other Republicans, for example, I think it was in North Dakota, a newly elected official to the state Public Utilities Commission said he now fully supports a moratorium on data center construction in the state, which North Dakota is a conservative state. We're talking about a Republican. You can see where the winds of public opinion are starting to shift here on this issue. That is sort of a quick and high-level overview of where resistance is. If you're curious about anything that I have said here or you'd like to follow up, best way to contact me is my email, which is zeb, Z-E-B, period, Larson, Larson, @gmail.com. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. That was amazing. There's so much really powerful information there. And I do see some of the same tactics that we have been using as part of No Concentration Camps California to fight the so-called detention centers. Really, these are being put in the hands of small municipality councils and commissions, and getting your local areas informed about them. It can be really powerful. And again, having 100 people show up, or 200 as we had, to one of the Cal City Commission meetings, it can have quite an impact. I am now going to share another clip.
Caked in sand, it's almost as if they've become one with this pit. This is an illegal tin mine, and you can find them everywhere on this island. It's dangerous work. We're told an average of 70 to 100 miners die every year.
Sometimes they are buried for days before we can recover the bodies. Sometimes 4 to 5 people die in a landslide. If we dig like 7 or 8 meters, then the risk of the sand falling on us is much higher.
This job is the best paid on the island, so they're willing to take that chance. Young children often help their parents. Some have died around these mine pits too. Tin from Banca and its sister island, Belitung, ends up with companies such as Apple, Samsung, and Sony. It's used to make our phones and laptops work. One of your gadgets possibly includes tin from here. Illegal mining is making more money than the legitimate companies. The free-for-all means the island is being torn apart. You don't get a sense of the damage tin mining has done to this island from the ground, but take to the sky, and the consequence of the world's demand for tin becomes clear. The landscape scarred by abandoned and active mines, and we're just showing you a small part of it, but it's like this across large parts of the island.
There are so many old mine pits, almost 20,000, and then they started mining the sea in 2006. So now we have noted we have lost at least 75% of coral reef around Banca Island.
The damage at sea could be even harder to fix. The tin will run out one day. The question is, what will be left of this island to provide for its future generations? Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera, Banca Island.
Going to introduce Bill. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Bill Kelly. I'm a member of NELA Alliance for Democracy, and I spent my career as an environmental journalist and an energy journalist and communicator. And tonight I want to talk about the bigger picture of AI and the environment. We've heard a lot about the local impacts, but now I want to look at the global impacts a little bit. So I'm going to go through this presentation, and I know we've all been listening for quite a while, so I'll try to make it as quick as possible. Many say that we're now, particularly Nate Hagens, an earth scientist and popular podcaster, that we're in what's called the mortar economy, the place from Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, where the Dark Lord Sauron ruled things. And basically, the modern day analog to this is that it's taking an increasing amount of energy and resources to sustain economic growth. Just quickly to look at what's called energy return on energy invested. In the 30s, for every gallon of gas you burned to pump oil, you got 100 gallons of oil. Today, that's down to about 4 gallons to 30 gallons per gallon of fuel that you burn, and so forth. We're in the same situation with metals, which I'm going to get into. So this is the projection for operational emissions from data centers worldwide, and it's million metric tons. So you can see that from 2020, it's tripling. So that's a relatively rapid increase. I'm going to just move forward here to this slide. And the thrust of this is that this is based on a Google estimate that the emissions from the data centers are only part of the story. There are actually more emissions of greenhouse gases that occur from mining and processing the materials that are used to build the computer servers and data centers and the buildings and the grid. And you can see here that even Google says 3 times as much of embedded emissions and all the equipment production in a data center. So let's look at the scale of a data center. This is Elon Musk's data center. This is near Memphis, but I want to talk about Colossus 2. It contains NVIDIA GPUs. These are processors that are used. One of them weighs the same as a Toyota Camry. It's about 3,300 pounds of metal in these. There are about an estimated 275,000 of them in Colossus 2 at this point, and some people project that eventually that will be doubled. So this is an enormous amount of metal. This machine here, the processor uses about the same amount of energy as a house. So it's a big draw on the grid. Let's look at the metals that are in here. This is a busy chart, but it's showing you the metals that are used in this equipment. And it's showing where there are colored bars next to each of the metals. And you can study this. We'll put it online. That is what the U.S. imports of those metals. You can see some of them are 100%. We don't mine any of them here. Most of them come from other countries. This is a picture of a nickel mining area in Indonesia, the scar on the land. They come from Chile, the Andes. They come from Africa. These are so-called artisanal miners in the Democratic Republic of Congo. People that do this work generally are low paid. They're exploited. There are few environmental standards often for the mines. The land is ruined. It's not restored. The water is polluted. The communities lose their livelihood after the mining is done. They move, and many of them die doing this work and are poisoned essentially by the pollution from the mining process. This is the downstream effects, the waste that's produced. These servers that are put into the data centers are estimated to have a useful life of 1 to 5 years. There are different estimates. And as I said, the data center that Elon Musk has there, Colossus 2, has about 1 billion pounds of metals mined in places that I just showed you from around the world. And when they're done using them, they become waste. And there is no plan at this point for how to handle the massive amount of waste. This is a place in Africa, particularly in Ghana. A lot of the e-waste went there after the Chinese stopped accepting it in other Southeast Asian countries. And this is Eric Lundgren, who's a leader in the right to repair movement. I had the pleasure to spend a day with him. He has a plant in Los Angeles where he recycles Tesla batteries to use for storing solar power. He's the only person I've ever met who actually spent time in the federal penitentiary. He was prosecuted by the Department of Justice for restoring old computers and reloading them with Windows. The DOJ filed charges against him on behalf of Microsoft, basically. But now he's, back in the business of recycling electronics. The same story is true with the downstream conditions where the electronic waste is often recycled. You have the poisoning of workers for pay, and the volume of e-waste is set to explode here from data centers. It's going to reach 2.5 million tons a year. and the emissions are almost going to double just from the recycling operations and waste themselves. There's more, though. AI will really reach its maximum potential, many say, with the advent of humanoid robots. These are being used in Asia already. There's some humanoid robot police in the picture. Bank of America projects that by 2060, 3 billion of these will be built and put in service. And of course, they're going to need metal alloys, rare earth metals, batteries, and so forth, and will become, electronic waste at the end of their life. There are a number of things, you say this is a bad picture, and it is, but there are a number of things that could be done to help. One of them would be to lengthen the lifetime of the servers that are used in data centers. You could have an energy efficiency standard. You could require renewable power to operate the data centers. You could require ethical supply chains. Rich nations such as ours could help poor nations, and so on. This will be online to look at. I would point out that when it comes to e-waste, there is something called the Basel Convention, and the U.S. has not ratified that and does not abide by it. But it requires countries around the world that did become signatories basically to solve their own e-waste problems. We have yet to do that here. So I just close with a cartoon, Sauron the Economist, and he is saying here that basically let's just substitute AI for in this situation. He's saying that AI will continue economic growth, but it will kill people because people are not producing enough economic growth. Only AI can produce economic growth. So this is a little dark humor from the Dark Lord. And finally, I have some further reading materials that you can refer to as you look at this PowerPoint. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. There's a lot of information there as well. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say thank you to Bill and Pablo, as well as Zeb Frida Afari, who is the co-conspirator of this program. We'll go ahead and manage the questions.
Okay, I see a question that says, is there a meaningful difference in environmental impact of data centers dedicated for generative AI capability relative to those housing general purpose computers, for example, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and data storage?
Sure, yes. And in short, yes, there is a major difference on data centers for storing data than for processing AI prompts. So now, what are some of the reasons? Now, processing AI prompts require more computational power. So in a single rack of computers inside a data center, the same space will use more energy and in consequence, more emissions, more water, just more overall resources than for storing or processing other type of data. And that's the main reason that we are hearing more about this topic these days, because of the proliferation of artificial intelligence compared to the previous generation of data centers that have been operating for a couple of decades or even more. Here's where it's important to distinguish the different types of AI. Again, the most science-related medical applications is the more traditional type of AI that uses less resources, is more bounded, is more efficient and very targeted for the application that you want. So it may be related to climate, and it's a model that is only focused on climate. If it's related maybe to some of the cancer research, it will be a model very focused on cancer. This is in contrast with like the large language models, ChatGPT et al., that are just built pretty much with all the information that is available in the internet. They have so much data, so much information that whenever you ask a question to the model, it just uses a lot of resources to find what you ask. That is very different. That if you have a very specific model, it will use less resources to produce basically the answers that you are asking. There is a whole set of environmental implications, even if it was possible, if they somehow make the engineering to make that possible. Will, I see you want to comment something?
Yes. I just make a couple of observations about data centers. Having written a lot about the siting of renewable energy facilities in California when the state adopted its renewable energy standard, requiring utilities to basically buy solar and wind power, geothermal, and so forth. There was just an explosive number of proposals that were made to build solar plants, wind facilities up and down the state. And most of them were submitted by people who were a small group that had enough money to put the paperwork together and to get, maybe a permit to build the project. And then they would try to sell it to someone that would actually have the money that could build it and operate it. And like with cleaning up the air in Los Angeles, I worked at the Air Quality Management District for many years as a communications manager. If you go back, there were all sorts of ideas about how to eliminate smog in Los Angeles in the 1950s, including putting tunnels through the mountains and big fans that would blow the air out into the desert, smog sewer pipes that would route the pollution up. So this is the early phase of AI, and people are rushing into it, seeking to, line their pockets and, make a lot of money. A lot of these proposals don't have legs financially, probably. They're not going to pan out. And there's a lot of pie in the sky. Elon was going to have us on Mars, I believe by now. Hasn't happened yet. And I do not think that data centers in orbit is anything I'm going to worry about. I'll worry about data centers built in my community or here on Earth before I'll worry about those circling the Earth.
Thank you. There is a question about China's approach. How is China's approach different to AI and to data centers?
Mm-hmm.
And also, Bill has written a book about China too. But please go ahead, Pablo, if you wanted to start, and then Bill.
Mm-hmm. Very similar in some aspects, and they are experimenting in other aspects. For example, one of the things that some people may have heard about is data centers underwater, under the ocean. This is to make the cooling more efficient or easier. That's something that they are working on, and I think they successfully have built one data center like that. Of course, you are switching the type of environmental implications that you have, and we still need to learn we still need to learn, what are going to be some of the environmental implications of also putting these types of machines underwater. They may be heating the space under the ocean where they are located, potentially having implications for ocean ecosystems and the species surrounding it. The cables that go into this data center. So it's, in a way, you're just switching some environmental impacts for others.
One of the key things in the geopolitical competition between China and the United States when it comes to AI, renewable energy, electric vehicles, all of these areas, is the chokehold that China has on rare earth metals. They don't necessarily mine all the rare earth metals in China, though they mine rare earth metals, and a lot of them. But they process almost 99% of the rare earth metals that are mined around the world. And these rare earth metals are used in the magnets, the chips, the other parts that are important in computers and cell phones and electric cars, the batteries and so forth. And they have stopped exports of rare earth metals periodically to the United States many times over the past 10 years or more. And the U.S. is struggling, and this gets back to the pictures of the mines I showed, to produce its own metals that are needed for all of the things I mentioned. And there is tremendous opposition to mining here. So that's why the mining primarily has gone to places where you have corrupt governments very often and weak standards. Places where a major mining company like Rio Tinto or BHP, can go in and basically buy access to get the minerals out. So I think that China has that as an advantage over the U.S. It has leverage. It's a tremendously robust economy. It has improved its educational standards and system dramatically. It has huge amounts of talent and worldwide connections now across the globe in Africa through the new Silk Road policy. They have established relationships in Latin America and Africa and have access to all sorts of minerals. And they have scientists and engineers who have produced, as you know, like DeepSeek, which is basically something that's open source and functions pretty well. So China is a major contender. I would not count them out. And, having said that, though, they're still largely coal powered, although recently emissions of greenhouse gases have started dropping there because they are the biggest producer in the world of solar power. So they are increasingly going renewable and could power AI more and more on renewable energy, while meanwhile, we're going the opposite direction, keeping coal plants open and actually talking about recovering trace amounts of metals from coal ash. So and there's money being spent by the federal government to develop this technology. So if that happens, it's going to just keep the coal plants going because we'll need the coal ash to get the metals.
I know, if I may just interject with a short comment, I think this issue is really making us realize that if going to even more authoritarian capitalism is the answer, then there's something fundamentally wrong in our society, that we are not thinking out of the box, outside the box, that we're dealing with a technology that is the product of authoritarian capitalism, an embodiment of it. And yet we're trying to solve the problem within the context of the system. It cannot be done. It's simply not possible. And when you think of how it's being done at the expense of humanity and nature. So I think that's what AI has to make us think about, thinking outside the box, outside of the limitations of the capitalist mode of production, and being open to other possibilities, and not thinking that thinking outside the box means going to communism, because communism was obviously another form of authoritarian capitalism. So let's think about these issues. Thank you. And one other question was about water. And someone said, why is fresh water being used to cool data centers?
These facilities require relatively clean water for operation and maintenance. So the more cleaner the water, the less additives they need to add. The additives that they usually add are related to bisescalants, so to reduce the amount of mineral buildup in the pipes. and also to reduce the amount of bacteria that sometimes can clog some of the filtration systems. So that would be mostly what they need, cleaner water. It doesn't need to be, I mean, they could have a pre-treatment water installed and like a water treatment plant either, well, before and after. They could do something like that, but for the most part, they don't.
Another comment about keep in mind AI has no morals, no emotions, no basis in truth or justice.
I would just say two words: Elon Musk. I mean, look at who's the biggest proponent and building the biggest data centers right now. I would like to address water in a specific example. There is a data center. In fact, it's the biggest data center being proposed in California that would be put in Imperial County, which is the low desert. And it was going to use wastewater for cooling, but the county turned down that proposal. And now the developer is suing to get a piece of the Colorado River at a time when the water availability is lower than it's been since the dams were built, and is being cut back by the states voluntarily. So you have a data center out there in the middle of the desert, and this gets to the question of why building data centers in areas of drought is how wise is that?
I think if we look at these critical and sensitive and really existential decisions are being made by those who are profiting from them. And so it's not really a question of should they be in the deserts, it's what can they get away with. It's not really, the question is not being asked what should they be used, how should they be used. It's how much money can I make by building these data centers, so that the environmental impacts are not being considered unless we force them to. And there's not the thoughtful question of what is the benefit versus the impact, like the medical question. I see it as the use of plastics, that there are certain uses that, like medical uses of plastic, that is really there's nothing else that can be used for the same purpose. And so that's something that maybe we should consider if we were to get rid of all of the others that have such horrific environmental impact that we could use other things for. And I think it's the same thing with this, with what you were talking about, Pablo, is that there are medical uses, there are machine learning, there is contained uses of AI, or let's just call it machine learning instead of the exciting artificial intelligence idea, is that, how can this be used thoughtfully?
Just to complement that point, that is like the industry purposely have created that big umbrella of AI rather than distinguish the uses that have been mostly positive in some aspects and just wrapping everything in the same AI.
And I was wondering, since we've almost reached the end of the program, would either of you have any suggestions for the audience about groups to get, I mean, other than our Northeast LA Alliance for Democracy activities coming up, participation in opposition to data centers in our area? Would you like to mention a couple of local efforts that people can get involved in?
Well, here there is a group called No Data Centers, and it is basically a social media group. But if you Google it, you can join. And there's a local group here where I live called No Data Centers San Gabriel Valley, and it's composed of people who stopped the data center in Monterey Park in San Gabriel Valley and got the city to adopt a moratorium on data centers that's permanent until lifted. So those would be two groups I would urge you to take a look at. And I'm sure, Pablo, there are others you know of up north as well.
Yes, also I want to share, so this resource is like questions that people can ask if there is a data center coming to their community and there is a public hearing meeting, what are relevant questions that people can ask to actually get some of the relevant data, no? So I'll be sharing that resource to you.
Thank you. And again, please do contact the Northeast Alliance for Democracy. The link to the companion brochure for this series. It's got a lot of good content.
I will also put a link in there so you can send the Mobilize link to people if you want to invite others. But we are looking forward to the next session. Frida, do you want to share a little bit about what the upcoming education session?
Sure. So the next one will be on Wednesday, August 12th, a week from tonight, at same time, 6 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be on AI and education, and we'll have three speakers: Nick Rapp, who's both a computer scientist and an education scholar and researcher, and Dorothy Potter Snyder, DP Snyder, who's a translator and professor of translation studies and Spanish translator, and myself as a librarian. And we'll be talking about ways in which AI is damaging, destroying the human ability for critical thinking, and how we as educators can help to bring back the teaching of critical thinking, how that can be incorporated in our work, and what critical thinking, what human critical thinking even means in contrast to AI, and ways in which both teachers and librarians can help.
Wonderful. Thank you, Frida. I do think it's important to know that, as Zeb was saying earlier, that there are ways that we can stop these and get more informed. And there are groups that are building across the country. There are local groups, as Bill was saying. There are also national groups, as he was also sharing. We're really thrilled to have so many of you with us tonight. Thank you so much, Pablo, for joining us. Bill, for such a wonderful presentation. Frida, for always helping us navigate, and all of you for being here and for caring to take your time to learn this really critical, I think, existential question that we have facing us. And we look forward to having you back at the next session. And please listen to the recording of the first one if you did not get a chance to do so. And we look forward to having you back. Feel free to email us at action@nellafordemocracy.org. Or next Wednesday, correct? The 12th? Or
Next Wednesday.
on education and AI. We will share that. And thank you again for everyone who is here tonight and sharing such really powerful information.
Thank you. Good night.